I fully support the police officer who shot and killed Chris Kaba. What Chris Kaba's family didn't want you to know was that their little angel was actually a violent Gangland triggerman who shot a man in a busy nightclub. There's sweet little innocent Mr. Kaba there discharging a weapon on a crowded dance floor. He had convictions dating back to when he was 13 years old for offences including stabbing with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, a knife-enabled gang assault when the victim was stabbed and had his arm broken, and 2 other knife offences. Here's the moment that Chris Kaba was shot in the head.
Watch yourself.
The Audi that he was driving was used as one of 2 getaway vehicles the night before the police shooting. 3 masked men fired a shotgun twice at unknown targets outside a school in Brixton. Apparently, he was also part of a music group who released a video seemingly boasting about shooting people.
Up there with a shotty, trying to get rap boy, that but TC boys got it. Everybody.
So that's the man who was shot dead by police, a dangerous thug who didn't care for the lives of others. The jury weren't allowed to know that information in case it clouded their judgment, and it still took them just 3 hours to find the police officer not guilty. Here is some members, anyway, of Mr. Kaba's family.
Today, we are devastated. The not guilty verdict leaves us with a deep pain of injustice, adding to the unbearable sorrow we felt since Chris was killed. No family should endure the unimaginable grief we have faced since Chris was stolen from us.
Look, I feel for them. I don't want anyone to lose a relative, all right? But you should know that the family demanded that the police officer was named, which, in my view, put his life at risk. But they did want to ban journalists from ever being able to report the truth about their beloved little Chris's criminal record. Funny that, isn't it? I think London Mayor Sadiq Khan should resign. Here's what he said after the shooting. My thoughts are with Chris Kaba's loved ones today. His death has had a huge impact on Londoners, and in particular black Londoners. Anger, pain and fear has been felt across communities, along with a desire for change and justice. Oh, hang on a minute. What about the pain and the anger that people would have felt when Chris Kaba was shooting at them? In my opinion, Jeremy Corbyn is a disgrace, standing with his little fist up in the air. Justice for Chris Kaba. Yeah, OK. I mean, you've got a load of white middle-class losers who look like they need a wash coming out and crying racism.
Justice! Now! Justice! Now! Chris Kaba! Chris Kaba!
I bet they feel really, really stupid today, don't they? These are the same idiots that turn up at every protest. I bet if you go into their bedsits, they've just got a load of different placards for each occasion, ready to go. If you read the BBC today, frankly, it's like that they've taken Chris Kaba's side, isn't it? Describing him as an unarmed father-to-be. The local Labour MP for Clapham and Brixton Hill, Bel Ribeiro Addy, get this, is, quotes, supporting the family. All right, so apparently they want urgent efforts to rebuild trust between police and the community. Well, the only thing that Chris Kaba trusted was his gun, wasn't it? The Independent Office for Police Conduct released a ridiculous statement, all geared towards appeasing the family. Firstly, we want to acknowledge Chris Kaba's family and friends today as they continue to grieve his death more than 2 years on. Our thoughts and sympathies remain with them and everyone else who's been affected. Look, I'm sorry, but the guy was an absolute monster. I don't wish death upon him, but, I mean, we can't be too sentimental about this, can we? The Runnymede Trust charity said they had full solidarity with Kaba and his family. You know, what about showing solidarity with the bloke he shot? Sometimes I think maybe, just maybe, this country hasn't gone absolutely mental. And then I see Labour politicians, charities, the Crown Prosecution Service, the Independent Office for Police Conduct and a load of race warrior protesters siding with a trigger-happy gangland criminal over a brave armed police officer. And I realise that actually we have lost the plot. Let's get our thoughts from our panel tonight. I'm joined by the political editor at the Daily Express, Sam Lister. We've got the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe, and the former Labour Minister, Bill Rammell. Loads of strong stuff there. You know, maybe you guys disagree with me, I don't know, but I was quite angry about some of that, in case you couldn't tell. Sam, you know, what do you reckon to some of these politicians who just jumped at the chance to take the side of Chris Kaba?
Well, I just think, save your sympathy for poor Martin Blake, the officer who has been named. I think that's a real tragedy, actually, for him. He's now at risk. His family are at risk. This man's life has been on hold. He's been hauled through the court system. This actually does not end here. The Independent Office of Police Complaints are looking at potentially still suspending it from booting him out of the force. This man's life has been ruined by this incident that happened during him doing his ordinary day job. And so where is the sympathy for him? And I just don't understand why the politicians you've talked about there are sympathetic to a man who we know has been a menace on the streets and not to an honest, decent police officer.
The thing is, look, again, I do want to stress this. I feel sorry for his family in the same way I would feel sorry for anyone whose loved one
I agree,
has
yeah,
died,
absolutely.
right?
They're a grieving family, and you've got to have sympathy for any grieving family.
Exactly.
But that does not
However,
mean...
I do find it a bit odd that they are, knowing Chris, as they must, ramping up this idea that, this guy was a bit of an angel. I mean, he wasn't really.
No, we know he's not.
Yeah.
His record shows that he's not. The criminality that he was involved in says that he's not. And we understand why they are grieving. But we also understand, and I'm not saying that is this particular instance that they're there, but there is a culture out there that as soon as there is an opportunity to try and take money from the state in some way, through compensation, we ramp up the claims against the police, against the government in any particular circumstances. And secondly, we also do unfortunately have a class of politicians represented by those people who can't sing in the Race Warriors. I mean, actually, to be fair, his gangster rap was probably a little bit more musical than their chanting for Kaba Kaba. But there are those who instantly use this as an opportunity for race baiting and using race as an illustration of politics. And as someone mixed race, and as I say this, I've always found this disgusting, the Black Lives Matter chanting out straight away. We don't have that level in this country of that culture, but we've engendered that level of culture over the past decade, trying to follow America where we didn't have it.
Yeah, OK, yeah. And, Bill, we've got a lot of people, Sadiq Khan, Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour MP that was in question in the local area, they're supporting the family. Yeah, Sadiq Khan, surely this is a resignation matter, isn't it? Initially coming out to bat, saying, justice for Chris Kaba or whatever, saying that, black people don't feel safe in London. That was a really, really dangerous thing to be saying at that time, especially in light of what we now know, no?
I think Sadiq's comments were ill-judged, and I think he needs to reflect upon that. My thoughts are with Sergeant Blake and his family, who've been through hell, and policing violent criminals is a really challenging, difficult job. However, no one is above the law. And the question I've got within this is that the CPS only refer a case for trial if they believe there's a 70% chance of conviction. This appears to be very wide of that mark, and I think there's some questions that need to be asked. But also, I made the point, no one's above the law, and I think that's really important, because I never want us to get to the situation that exists in the United States, where there's a much wider use of firearms by the police without the restraint and the proportion that we have in this country. Some great points there. I think especially this idea, this is one of life's great unanswered questions will always be, if Chris Kaba had been white, would this have been elevated to the extent that it was and this guy being charged with murder? We will never know that. Hopefully we never have to find that out. But that is a point. And when you see now, like, the IOPC coming out, and the first 3 or 4 sentences of their statement after this, after a police officer has been found not guilty of murder, are all geared at what a sad loss this is for the family, all that. And then it gets to, like, sentence number 4 or 5, and it's like, our thoughts are also with the police officer and everyone else involved. Well, I'm sorry, but why would you be a police officer today? Why would you be a firearms officer today?
And we're going to continue investigating him. This is not over for Sergeant Blake. This is the point. And actually, I think there is a wider issue here that actually his fellow officers, they now, they're employed on the basis that they may have to shoot somebody at some point. It's a terrible thing, but that is the whole point of their job. Now, if they, every time they're in this situation, they second-guess their own thoughts because they're worrying, am I going to end up in court? Am I going to end up booted out of the force? Is my name going to be published and then my family are under threat? Then they won't pull that trigger, and then there is no point in having them. And so their colleagues now his colleagues now are having to live with this.
Should he have an apology? You know, because again, you know, these police officers, they're going to get, they know there's going to be no backup. Certainly not from the Mayor of London. Certainly not from the usual staff. You know, does this police officer need an apology?
He does deserve an apology, because what I saw with all those little comments you've talked about by the Police Investigation Committee, by Sadiq Khan, is institutional grovelism. All they're doing is grovelling to this particular small niche of people in which I believe there is this race-baiting culture that's about there. And I don't want to see that. But he certainly deserves an apology from those people when they make statements without the facts and on the basis that they can turn this into a political issue, which they hope they can get votes on.
But I think it's really important we don't jump to the wrong conclusions. The thrust of what's just been said is that, you know, the police are at risk of prosecution. Actually, the facts don't bear that out. I think there's been 2 cases out of 17,500 where it's been brought to court. It's incredibly rare, and the police can't be above the law. However, I think the other issue that troubles me within this is the non-revelation of his track record.
Yeah.
I've personally got some experience of that. Before I was an MP, supporting someone who went as a witness to court for a guy who had assaulted a student, sat there for 2 days, he was sentenced, and then his track record came out with crimes as long as your arm. And I think there needs to be a review. I understand the issue of prejudicing a court case, but you know...
Surely that's relevant. See, I felt exactly the same way as you with that, because I was looking at that and I was trying to think, all right, so if I was on that jury and I was shown, presumably I was shown a bit more as well than some of the stuff that was released there, but the gist of it is a car chase followed by a shot being fired and what happened. And I think, you know, there was possibly a chance that police officer could have been found guilty of murder. And then 24 hours later, all of this comes out. All of this comes out. If I'd have been on that jury, there's no way I'd have found that guy guilty if I knew everything that we know now.
And that's actually one of the safeguards that has been placed in criminal law and the criminal justice system, is to enable an individual to be tried on the individual facts. So more often that we don't. However, there is a precedent for this. If you look at the Me Too movement, the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, both here and the US, have been writing out and putting out newspapers. Please tell us information that could help convict this person, because we don't have it on paper at the moment. But if you come in and gang up a whole load of you, so they are trying to create that precedent. So if that precedent stands, this will have an impact in the future, or maybe it should do.
It's interesting. It is interesting. Well, look, you know, this is going to rumble on because, as you rightly say, so it appears that this police officer may well go on to face some kind of misconduct hearing. We'll see. I
think that was the original intention. I think they're reviewing it in the light of the not guilty verdict.
Yeah. I
think it's unlikely that action will be taken.
But it's not. It hasn't been withdrawn. The Met have withdrawn their involvement.
Because they have a process to go through. You can't just automatically, within hours, make that decision.
Well, I think, personally, I think that should be the case. But there you go.
we might get an answer to that soon. Anyway. But right, guys, thank you very, very much. Great to have you kick-starting the hour of the show here.